Welcome back to the front line with Joe and Joe Pasillo, Joe Resinello, and we are way into the breach, brothers and sisters, on the Crusade Channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing. Our call-in telephone number is 844-527-8723, and our live chat room, the only social media out there worth actually socializing in, is online at crusadechannel.com/chat. Please make sure all you good listeners out there who like us on Facebook at the Frontline with Joe and Joe, same on YouTube, Frontline with Joe and Joe. We have all our interviews and conversations, whole lot of fun stuff and good content on there that we think you will thoroughly enjoy. Now, having said all that, Joe and I spend a lot of time talking about the left. Why? Because the left is our enemy, okay? But remember, over that, our overarching enemy is always the devil, but are the oligarchs of the world. Those who, both on right and left, seek to control politics, particularly economics, okay, have it all intertwined to basically treat you all like a bunch of serfs. That's what's been going on in America for a very long time now. And many of the guilty parties are on what self-identified as they would identify themselves on the political right. Well, Joe and I have a problem with them too. Okay, so we want to start this conversation by saying, beware the Chamber of Commerce. And Joe's going to elaborate on that a little bit more.
And I think this is a great story. And the reason why I think it's a great story is it shows Trump's commitment to the American people, the worker. You know, people say, how can a billionaire playboy from New York City relate to the worker? This is a story that actually points to it. Basically, this week, Trump announced a multi-million-dollar contract with the Flow Corporation based in Richmond, Virginia, to begin returning pharmaceutical production to the United States. This is what Peter Navarro had to say. He's a White House trade advisor. He said, this is a great day for America. This has all the elements of the Trump strategy. It's made in the USA. It's innovation that will allow American workers to compete with, get this, and he's spot on, not politically correct, but he's accurate, that it will allow American workers to compete with the pollution havens, sweatshops, and tax havens of the world. What is he talking about? He's talking about slave labor.
Right.
Where do you think Nike makes their sneakers? They make them in China. Malaysia.
Oh, yeah, or somewhere in Asia.
Where do you think this goes on? Do you think they have unions? I've traveled through parts of those of that world. I've been to Cambodia. I've been to Vietnam. I've been to India. Do you know that an Indian construction worker on the street, I witnessed this with my own eyes, is using, you know how we use jackhammers to break up the street? They're working barefoot using picks. I've seen this with my own eyes. I've seen construction workers in India climbing bamboo scaffolding barefoot. Do you know in New York City, a guy, an iron worker, probably makes $60 an hour, makes a very good living. Doing that in India, you make if you get a plate of food at the end of the day. That's what he's talking about. He's basically saying we're bringing these jobs back to the U.S., as opposed to companies, by the way, who could care less. Many of these people are Republicans.
That's right.
Are perfectly fine with sending that job to India. I've done audits. Again, I'm a trained auditor. I can remember doing a job at an American bank talking about they outsource jobs, clerk jobs to India, saying we pay people $20,000 a year. It's a $60,000 a year job in New Jersey. And they're perfectly fine with that.
Go they are.
Guess who's pocketing that money?
The corporations.
There you go.
Right.
And Donald Trump is saying, no, I'm bringing that job back. And if you decide to go over there, I'm going to charge you what, Joe Pasillo?
A tariff.
Because you're not getting away with it. So you're bringing that job back. Now, Joe talked about people in the Chamber of Commerce having a problem with that. The CEO, Tom Donahue. This is what he had to say. And it makes no sense, but it makes perfect sense. He basically had to say, the U.S., this is a quote, the U.S. must not reshore all of its production back to America and must stay reliant on foreign supply chains.
Why?
protecting the resiliency of our supply chain doesn't have to mean reshoring all production to the United States.
Let me stop you. Yes, it does. What's his name? Mr. Donahue? Yes, it does, Mr. Donahue.
Probably an Irish Catholic.
But
If I was going to bet money.
Or an evangelical Christian. I always, in fairness, I love all you evangelical Christians out there. Chamber of Commerce seems to be full of right-wing conservative evangelical Christians. They just love shipping jobs overseas. They love globalism. These are people who have no problem with an open border.
Why? Because
right?
it enriched their coffers.
That's right.
They don't care. Listen, I worked for a corporation and have for 2 decades. Listen to me. I'm telling you, you are a line on an Excel spreadsheet. If they can figure out how to get rid of you, they most assuredly will.
Right.
That is the way. There is no like brotherly, like, look, I'm looking out for you, guy.
Right.
Heck no.
No.
It doesn't work that way.
No, well, not with big corporations. I will say, and this is why we had a conversation with John Horvat, which you could find online, both on our YouTube page and our Facebook page. John Horvat was discussing his book with us, Return to Order, okay? Having an authentically Christian economy. I know that bugs the left, but who cares, okay? But that, what you just talked about, was bringing morality back to our economic system. That no, you just don't do whatever you want. We rail against the sexual revolution by saying to people, you know, it's a really bad idea if you actually think freedom means doing whatever you want in the sexual arena. And it's the same thing in the economic sphere. You just don't get to do whatever you want. Morality, the moral law, the natural law applies to you too, Mr. or Mrs. Businessman.
Whether you're Catholic or Christian.
That's right.
And here's the thing. Christ spoke about that specifically, about usury as well as withholding a day's wages.
So by the way, withholding somebody's wages, I would suggest even further, and I'm not a biblical exegete, so I don't want to twist Bible teaching, okay? I would suggest paying somebody dirt cheap wages.
Oh, of course it
because
is.
That's the theft of labor also. But both withholding wages, or at least withholding wages, is not only a sin, not only a violation of the natural law, it is a sin that cries out to heaven for vengeance.
Did you just use the term vengeance in the same sentence with God? Yes.
Yes.
God, there are sins that cry to God for vengeance.
You see that worker Joe was talking about in India who's barefoot has got to take a pick and go out into the street to break apart the sidewalk or the street because they have to retar it or whatever the case might be. That guy who's working for a subsistence wage is a slave. The person employing him, if you want to call it really employment, is making him a slave. The system has made him a slave because he's not receiving a just wage for the work that he's doing. That is a crime. That is a sin. And you're not going to accuse Joe and I of being a couple of socialists. This is capitalism. But capitalism is not an idol to be worshipped. Okay? Morality still applies. God's law oversees economic activity and also. And the Chamber of Commerce is saying, no, it's going to cost us too much to reshore all American manufacturing. Well, then too freaking bad. Well, you know, that's our attitude. Too freaking bad. You know what? Trump's attitude is the same. Next time something happens, you want us to be relying on any foreign power for products that we absolutely need, that we have the workers, the skill, the education system. Even with our disastrous state of our education system, we still have an education system that educates people better than other countries.
And I've seen this firsthand. I have worked in South America, and the Pope comes from South America. Why do I bring this up? I bring this up because many people in South America are Catholic, and it is a small percentage of the population who are Catholic who basically exploit workers. And he's seen it, and so did I. And I'm going to give you a case in point. Working in Brazil, talking to an affluent woman in the office. I don't know what her husband did, but she also worked for an international bank. She told me, this was 20 years ago, that I have a nanny that lives in my house. I pay her $220 a month. A month. That woman comes into her house from Sunday to Friday and lives away from her family, and she's paid nothing. I worked in Paraguay and talked to a gentleman. William Kent was his name. He went to Notre Dame University. I can't afford to go to Notre Dame University. I'm from New Jersey. He lived in Paraguay. He told me that his nanny made $50 a month. And he told me, and Joe, I'm paying her well. Maybe for those standards you are. But at the same time, do you think that that is just?
Right.
That you're paying somebody? That you're paying somebody $50 a month to watch your kids, that they're away from their own family?
Well, let's break this down.
Is this a Catholic idea? And this is something that the Pope has rightfully brought up.
Of course. And if you're a self-identified Christian, let's get something straight. Okay. When you say, well, I pay the guy $10 an hour because he's willing to work for $10 an hour. And if he doesn't work for $10 an hour, I could go hire that guy because he's willing to work for $10 an hour. They're in their mind, they're so twisted that they think by paying somebody what they're willing to work for makes it moral or just. I think Aquinas would have a little bit of a problem with that. What you're doing is, and this is very important, we have had now the conditions in this country set in as far as labor is concerned, starting with the sexual revolution in the 1960s that brought a tremendous amount of women into the workforce who did not want to be in the workforce. A lot of them don't. A lot of women do not want to be in the workforce, but their husbands' wages have been so diluted, they had to get up and actually go out and go to work. So you have that flood of people coming into the labor market. And then you have these same people who are right-wing agreeing with the left-wing and the Soros types, okay, when it comes to open borders. Why? Because when those conditions are set, then there are plenty of people who are willing to work for that paltry $10 an hour. And you have businesses that are just paying what these people are willing to work for, because they don't have to compete for labor, because you have too many people in the labor pool. When you bring people out by reversing these conditions, like promoting family life, getting women out of the workforce and back into the home, securing that border. This way you're not exploiting cheap Mexican labor, okay? Then what do the businesses have to do? Now they have to compete for labor. When they compete for labor, you know what happens in my little example? You ain't paying $10 an hour. Now you're probably going to have to pay $20,
and that
or maybe even
$25.
Right, and that's your problem,
Mr.
Donahue. You don't want to resure, because these are going to have to be good paying jobs for American workers, where overseas you could get away, like Joe said, with paying somebody crap wages. Here you're going to have to pay them more. Why? Because they're Americans and they demand a higher wage. That's his problem with it. That's Mr. Donahue and the Chamber of Commerce's problem with Trump reshoring our manufacturing. And you want to know what? You're not going to be able to stop him.
Well, let's bring it up to a higher level, to God's law. You know, again, God is not a Republican or a Democrat.
I thought he was a Republican.
No, God is looking for all people, out for all people. And we are to treat people with dignity, respect, and equity. And that includes basically, if you employ somebody, to give them a fair and just wage. Listen, here's another twist. If you sweep the street, that's not worth $100,000 a year. It's not, because the skill set does not equate to $100,000. However, that person does deserve a fair wage.
Right.
And too many people, goes across the Catholic circles and, frankly, the Christian circles across this country. They basically say it's only business. No, it's not.
Get tired of that.
You're not. Starving my kids isn't business.
But like I said, they'll say, but you were willing to work. Well, I have no other choice.
What choice do I have?
If you give me no choice, if I have a certain skill set, and all the employers, there's too many people with my skill set. And many of them don't either want to be in the workforce, or they're allowed to come into our country to dilute our workforce. Okay, then I'm competing with them. So I have to take the $10 an hour. We want the conditions reversed in this country. We want the promotion of families to start with. We want promotion of family life, so women who don't want to be in the workforce come out. Okay, and we want that border secured so that Chamber of Commerce right-wing conservative Christians can't exploit that labor anymore. And yes, Donald Trump is right. if you're manufacturing something overseas that we should be manufacturing here, if you're not doing it here, we're going to hit you with a tariff.
And
so
also,
you might as well do it here. You're going to pay either way.
and this is what Tom Donahue is against. There's some research done by the Coalition for Prosperous America, and they're addressing this reshoring issue regarding all things pharmaceutical. And this is what they said.
Now, this is just pharmaceutical manufacturing.
They said, with regard to what Trump just enacted, it said that the U.S. would likely create 800,000 American jobs, likewise reassuring all medical supplies to the U.S., potentially create 300,000 more jobs.
That's 1.1 million jobs.
Now, why does
good paying?
Why does Tom Donahue have a problem with that? Why? Because Tom Donahue wants to be rich. You see, this is another thing. Read the social compendium of the Catholic Church.
Oh, I would encourage anyone to
read
read that.
it, because by the way, picking and choosing what you believe as a Catholic is called cafeteria Catholicism. That includes the quote unquote, all of it. You got to read all of it. And that is a belief. What that says is basically we are here to live based upon our needs. This isn't our home. Now, I am a capitalist. I work at a bank. I am a capitalist, but I have a responsibility. My responsibility, one, is to my family, but secondly, to society. If God has given me much, much will be expected of me. That includes you, Mr. Tom Donahue, who are rich, most likely. That means sharing in your profits equitably. That means this is not your home. Heaven is. That you're supposed to meet your needs and the needs of your family. And frankly, and this is not socialism, because I don't believe in doing that through the state. I believe in doing that through my own hand. And that's what Catholicism teaches, and it's documented quite clearly in the social compendium of the Catholic Church. And whether you go to a Novus Ordo Mass or a Latin Mass doesn't exempt you from it.
That's right.
And Christ was very clear in his teachings on it. He said those who've been given 10 coins, those who've been given 5 coins, and those who have been given 1 coin. And we're supposed to use them for the benefit of society. First with our family, second with the society at large.
That's right.
And Mr. Tom Donahue, you're not doing